Right, so in today's video, I'm going to be talking a little bit about whether I think it was worth getting rid of the rye grass in this back garden and going with Bent and Fescue instead. And I'm also going to be giving you an update on how both lawns are looking now that it's been around about 4 months since we got on and actually seeded this space from scratch, and just over 3 months since we turfed this top lawn too. So let's start off then with this space up at the top. This was the turf that was provided by Tillis Turf, and we actually put it down on this space in early May. And I almost see it as cheating really in the lawn care space, because to get a lawn this good is going to take, or this dense should I say, is going to take probably a few years to really get to. With the nature of the plant that it is, the more you cut it, the more you prune it, the actual more that plant starts to multiply, develop and thicken up the sward. And the fact that it stayed as thick as it has and actually thickened more since actually putting it down, I think is really, really impressive. However, that's not always a good thing, because one issue we have had on this lawn this year has been a little bit of disease. If you saw one of my previous videos a few weeks back, we actually got on with iron sulfate to try and mitigate that disease problem, which we absolutely did, and we've eradicated it now. We killed off those spores, we dried out the grass plants, and that's fine. But you got to remember, disease is a mixture of two things. First thing is the weather, and the second thing is obviously the density. Because this is a really dense sward, and because we've had quite a wet summer so far, it's meant that quite a lot of moisture sat on the grass blades a lot of the time. It's sat within that thatch layer. It's enabled that disease to actually multiply. So I guess that is a disadvantage of having a lawn like this. And I've also been really impressed with the colour as well. You know, bent grass and fescue is notoriously known for being a lighter shade of green compared to rye. Often if you want to get that really dark football pitch style lawn, then you would go with rye because it gives you a much darker plant. However, because I've not got a ryegrass lawn and a bent fescue, I've not got two to kind of compare side by side, I don't really notice much of a difference. All I do know is that this lawn has maintained its colour really well. I've actually only fed this lawn once since actually turfing the space. I put a bit of feed down before I rolled the turf out, but I fed it once since, and the fact that it's been 3 months now, well, 3.5 months really, since we actually got on and did this space, I think is testament to how well suited this plant is to this space. And the same things kind of go for this lawn down at the bottom. Obviously there is a little bit of a difference because this was seeded from scratch and we got on and put the seed down sort of late April time. So you're talking maybe 2 or 3 weeks before we actually turfed the space up at the top. But this space now is really starting to mature, it's starting to get there, and the sward has thickened more than I thought it would. Again, if you just bring in really close to the sward, you can see how dense the space really is. And what I've actually been really surprised with as well is just the colour of the space. Similar to what I said up at the top, it's maintained quite a nice dark green colour. I know lawn stripes aren't everyone's cup of tea. However, for me, I'm a massive fan of them. And what I'd often find when this was a ryegrass space was that I'd put the stripes in. They'd look amazing for the first day. The second day, you'd kind of see them by day 3 because there's that much vertical growth. It'd almost reset itself and you wouldn't see any of the stripes. However, you can see from this space here, the stripes are really popping at the moment, and this lawn hasn't had a cut since yesterday. Now I know it's not a massive amount of time, but when this was a ryegrass lawn, after 24 hours, you'd start to lose those stripes. And that's not because I'm getting on with a really heavy lawnmower, it's because I'm cutting on a regular basis, but the actual sward has a lot of lateral growth as opposed to vertical growth, and that's meant that the grass has sort of been able to hold that stripe for a little bit longer. Now this lawn hasn't been perfect the entire time. It's not been without some of its issues, and one of those issues with this space in particular has been with weed grasses. Over the past 6 weeks, we've had quite a lot of weedgrass sort of encroaching in on the space. However, I've actually only picked 2 weedgrasses out of the space up at the top. And I think the reason why is because this is obviously a fairly new lawn. There's much more opportunity for those weedgrasses to take hold and establish themselves in a thinner, newer sward. However, with this space up at the top being a more established, densely packed sward, the weedgrasses haven't really had the opportunities up there to be able to thrive. And I mean, it's not a massive, deal getting on every so often picking them out, but I can imagine if you've got a space much bigger than the one I'm stood in front of now, that it can become quite a chore trying to keep on top of those weed grasses, particularly in the early stage of your lawn. And not just weed grass as well. If I think about, the actual kind of like broadleaf weeds that you'd usually get, things like dandelions. Sometimes you get like clover encroaching in on your lawn. There's been very little on this space. Now, don't get me wrong, there has been a few. There's been the odd one here and there, but because I've been cutting the lawn quite short, I've been able to identify them fairly easily and pick them out when they've been really small. But I do need to say that this space up at the top has not had one single weed since it was laid. Now, obviously, it's only been 3.5 months, so there's plenty of time, especially over the winter. Now, if I was to sum up these lawns in one word, it'd have to be consistency, because I've not yet had a lawn, or lawns should I say, that have been consistent as these two. As anyone will know who's like well into this hobby, is that lawn care can be much more sort of demanding and time consuming than you sort of would initially expect it to be. I found that when these spaces were ryegrass lawns, I'd notice a massive difference week to week with them, and often I'd notice those differences when I wasn't actually getting on and feeding the lawn. I'd often find that they'd need quite a lot of water, quite a lot of feed to be able to maintain that dark green colour, but also as well to maintain sort of that thickness of the sward. But with these two spaces, I've not really had to do a whole lot to them, which is a pro, but also at the same time, it's a con. I've really not done a lot to this lawn to keep it in the condition that it's in at the moment. I've fed it a handful of times. I fed it quite a lot when I first seeded it, and that was to get the plant to mature as quickly as possible. But I think it's only had actually one feed in the last 6 weeks or so, and it's kind of working for me at the moment instead of me working for the lawn. Now, I know to a lot of lawn enthusiasts that can put them off quite a lot, because people want to be coming out, they want to be cutting the lawn, they want to be feeding the lawn, they want to put iron down, they want to put seaweed down, they want to put humic acid down, they want to put feed down, NPK coming out the ears, and I get that. I do get the drive to want to come out. And I found more so this month in August, I've kind of sat there thinking, what can I do to the lawn? And then I've cut the lawn and I've looked at it and I've gone, probably not a lot really, because it's doing everything itself. But I must admit, it's been quite satisfying for that to be the case. Now, that doesn't mean that there's nothing I'm going to be doing to these lawns going into autumn, because they're not going to stay like this on their own. They are going to need some sort of intervention, and that's where I've got a plan for autumn coming up. I've been doing quite a few things to these lawns to manage the thatch levels, to think about what sort of aeration program we're going to put in through the winter, because these next few months now are going to be absolutely critical to maintaining this space through winter. Yes, we're going to lose a little bit of colour through winter, we're going to lose a little bit of density from the plant, but what we're hoping to see is that, you know, this is supposed to be, and is technically, a native grass to the UK. It's used to this climate, it knows what the dealio is, so fingers crossed it can survive and do its thing through winter. But I'll do another update in a few months' time, and we'll see how we get on as we get into the back end of October, as we get through November, December, and into those January, February months where quite often you see the most damage being done by nature. So I know I didn't do really anything in today's video, but I just wanted to give everyone a bit of an overview as to how the lawns are looking today on just like a normal day when I'm not really doing anything to them. I want to just sort of get an insight into what I have found as the pros of these lawns, because there are plenty of them, and what the cons are as well, because like I said, there are, you know, a handful of them as well. But if you'd like to stick around on this channel and check out sort of how these lawns are getting on through the winter, because maybe you're in a position like I was at the start of this year, where I'd gone with ryegrass, it has struggled, it wasn't perfect in my space, and I was looking for a solution to actually improve it and get a lawn that's not going to last one particular season, but that's going to last, you know, throughout all 4 of them. So if you are interested and you've not already, consider subscribing. My Instagram is in the description below, as it always is. If you enjoyed the video or you found it interesting, feel free to give it a like, and as ever, finally, thanks for watching.